That's interesting. Okay.
I see Supragya has joined. Hello, Supragya. We're just kicking off this event, AMA session on democratization of predictive analytics for enterprise. I'm Madhumita Mantri. I'm a product lead at Startree, and I was an ex LinkedIn, and that's where I got to work with Hema and had a wonderful time working with her. Currently, I'm in a space, it's an early stage startup called Startree, working in real time analytics and anomaly detection space. So I was curious to learn more about how the predictive analytics space is evolving. And I saw Hema is doing something really interesting and cool. And I decided that okay, why don't I reach out to Hema and learn from her what's her journey in the predictive analytics space, what are the cool stuff they are doing. So I'm having this MA session. Some of the logistics I would like to quickly tell. If any of you have questions, raise your hand and I will invite you to the stage and you can unmute and ask questions that we can make this very interactive. Unfortunately, there's not a chat that is available, so you can post your questions. So we will do that way. And I have a set of questions that I will be going through, but not necessary that I would follow that script. So please chime in and raise your hands. With that, I'll open up the floor for Hema. Hi, Hema. Welcome to this AMA session, and I'm super excited that you're here and would love to hear more from you about your career journey to head of engineering at Kumo.AI, and if you can share some of the tips to the folks who are listening in and who are interested to spin up their career in the space. We'll start with that.
Thank you, Madhu. Yeah. Thank you, Madhu. And, it's a pleasure to be here and again have a conversation with you in a professional context. I think it's been a while. And it's also fun to use the LinkedIn events product, which I was involved in building, but, now I'm a bigger consumer of LinkedIn. But that said, the journey to, uh, Kumo, I mean, I started my career in the field of AI. I've been in it since grad school, so that was more than 20 years ago. And, Kumo came as a confluence of many personal and professional journeys. When I came to LinkedIn and I was doing content, I was doing machine learning for search and recommendations, especially content recommendations. But I came across graph problems there, and in particular in LinkedIn, a lot of the graph problems sat in the growth team. And so there were tough technical problems to solve, but the space of growth, and growth basically means growing your business, right? So it's basically finding new market opportunities for the business, being able to expand the presence of the business. It could be, and in LinkedIn, it meant growing the network, the graph, connecting people to more people so that they could find jobs and so on and so forth. But growth teams across the valley and across different companies tend to have a very, agile DNA. They're very impact focused, very metrics focused, and they want to test out many hypotheses. They're very data driven, right? And in solving many of the technical problems, I also started thinking about, AI productivity, right? And I was involved in several AI productivity and data infrastructure problems at LinkedIn just in order to make my team more agile. And I started finding a lot of fun problems at this, and I was thinking, hey, this is where the next, big shift is going to happen. I also became aware of the cloud revolution, right? So, everything's moving to the cloud. The modern data stack is very cloud first. And a lot of the deep technical problems or the tough ones are solved in a SaaS model. So, they get solved in the SaaS model. And if you're, the next generation of the LinkedIn's and the Pinterests and so on, you would probably start cloud first. You would pick components from the different cloud providers and build your application from there. So that was the natural trajectory. And at you know uh, it was the confluence of all these thoughts and just meeting my co-founders who also were having similar, you know, were in the similar journey. We knew each other for a very long time. That actually led us to, build Kumo. And at Kumo, what we want to do is actually make predictive analytics or AI in general, because right now, and I'm going to say this many times during our conversation, is the I see a convergence of the whole analytics and predictive analytics and AI space, or over the next decade or so. And Kumo is, the starting point or the inflection point of that new revolution.
Awesome, Hema. Thanks for the nice introduction and sharing your journey. I think growth sounds definitely very exciting, and I think it's a common problem that every businesses face this. And as you said rightly, like combining the predictive analytics plus the AI power is definitely the new phase. And I'm working in the anomaly detection space. I keep hearing from my users all the time that kind of question, like how I can see the how I can predict the future, like how I can query into the future. I think that sounds interesting. So I'll pause for a second and see if from the audience if you have any questions for Hema. Otherwise, I will move on to my next question. If you're using this product for the first time, LinkedIn Audio, you can there is an option you can raise your hand, and I can invite you to the stage. Okay, looks like none as of now, so I'll move forward with my. Oh, I see there's one hand raised. Let me invite you. So, Srinivas, I unmute. Yeah, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask question.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing me into the stage. So, um, as Kumo, being a predictive analytics future, right? So, do anybody need any coding experience, or is this going to be a GI based platform that you built?
Yeah. So at Kumo, the way we're building the product is actually that we're targeting business users, right? So if you have the understanding of your business, you understand, what tables exist in your warehouse are. It's a low code solution, right? But you would write something that resembles a query. It's a very SQL like interface because we're targeting an analyst audience, but you do not need to know the deep details of how machine learning engineers operate today. And today, to be a machine learning engineer, you need to be this unicorn of a computer scientist plus a business owner plus masters in machine learning. So that our target audience is that. Does that answer your question, Srinivas?
Yeah. So, uh, another question to continue to that.
Srinivas, we cannot hear you. Hello? Hema, can you hear me?
Lagging much. So when we talk about the models, right? So there exist a lot of models that are available in the market, and people are building their models in R or Python or any other tech stack, right? So it may be answers. So how many number of models that you integrate and are readily available to train with the given historical information with Kumo?
Got it. Got it. So, if you have to use R or statistics or these other packages, you need, you know, you need expertise. You need people who have, what I call the equivalent of master's plus or graduate degree proficiency in data science, right? Because you need to be able to pick the algorithm, you need to be able to tune the algorithm, and so on and so forth. The way Kumo does it is we actually take your problem specification, which is in that very SQL-like format, and we run AutoML under the hood. You don't have to create your training data set. We do that for you. We train your parameters for you. And under the hood, we basically run a class of algorithms called graph neural networks. And that's the core technology. It encapsulates many, many different problems. So we have Kumo offers is same capabilities, but you know, and a lot of automation for a business user.
Thank you so much. That answers my question.
Super.
Great question, Srinivas. Hema, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Okay, great. I have some internet issues, so those also if in similar boat having internet issues, so just refresh your browser, it works, and you can unmute and ask questions. So I have my next question for you. Could you explain what predictive analytics in simple terms? The reason why I'm asking this question, there might be folks who will be listening to our audio even later on, and I just wanted to um, target all types of audience who are learning and have no idea to the space and interested in learning further.
Yes, absolutely. So let's just talk about analytics, right? So back in the day, if you look, or even today, right, most analysts and companies are very embedded with their business owner, right? And often, just like Srinivas and I had that conversation, knowing whether your new user who was acquired 2 months ago is going to churn or not uh, is a question that a business user is often interested in, right? And the typical way to answer this is you would just go and look at engagement or activity or whatever you have in your system or payments or whatever to on historical data. And all businesses have become data driven. So when the C-suite asks the question, how are my users doing, we've become really good at looking at our dashboards, pulling up data, and quickly being able to answer the questions. And in fact, companies like yours, like Startree, even make that even more real time, right? So that part has gotten really well commoditized. But now decision makers are asking more. They're saying, how will my business do next week? Whom should I send coupons to in and get high ROI, right? Or who should I upsell to, right? So these are all now on that spectrum of analyst to predictions. Now, some companies used to solve this by just drawing a regression line over, historical data, but the future is not always the same as the past, right? You can actually use machine learning uh, to solve this problem. So this is where I see like predictive analytics and AI starting to converge. And we're starting to use the term somewhat interchangeably. At the extreme end of the spectrum, of course, when people think of AI, they think of very near real time systems that when I click on a TikTok video, the next, the system immediately is able to predict what the next TikTok video we should show the users. That's the extreme, super real time AI engineering job today, but predictive analytics is the beginning of that journey for most companies.
Yeah, I think that very well said. I mean, very few companies are able to do that successfully. I think primarily not other companies are yet trying. One is probably the data literacy gap, and second, probably they don't have the right resources to get started with. So I guess doing something like this and more, I mean, converging predictive analytics plus AI is the way to go forward, and seems like a very powerful combination for future. So
Absolutely.
I have a quick follow up question to that. Why do we need predictive intelligence for enterprises? If you can share some examples, that'll be helpful for the audience.
Yeah, so let's actually continue to build on what we talked, right? We talked about, the new customer acquisition prediction, right? Like, whom should I send a coupon to, or who's going to churn, or whom should I upsell to, right? Often this will start as a, business question, but then eventually, people want to start operationalizing this, right? Like, they say, hey, I could set up growth and marketing campaigns, and I can set up email campaigns, and uh, you know so then you want to start operationalizing. You want, daily, weekly, monthly batch jobs that do these predictions. And then you and now there are lots of these, automated uh, marketing, or sales operations kind of systems that can actually ingest these kind of predictions. So often we see in the many customers that we talk to, they start with just trying to answer questions, but then they want to consume these predictions in uh, some many times growth and marketing cases. But then we also see, recommendations, because say if you're the kind of business who's uh, let's say a retail store whose inventory is fairly, on a day over day, reasonably static, or people's preferences are fairly static, you can do recommendations also in a platform like Kumo or any of the other predictive analytics platform, right? Like, as long as you can frame your problem as, what should I show a given user? So you can put this in a batch offline process, you can consume it in a cache in a real time system. So oftentimes companies start there, you know, first with growth and marketing use cases, then recommender use cases. And then another big area that, intelligence is needed is fraud, for example, right? A lot of payments are online, and a lot of companies are just operating online businesses. So fraud becomes another big vertical where, intelligence, there is no way out other than intelligence, because uh, this field is so adaptive, and how fraud happens is so adaptive, that it's only AI that can catch up to that. So, and why do we need so there are many business use cases, and oftentimes I think, Madhu, you brought up a very good point, which is uh, you don't have resources, right? There are way too many problems where you need predictions, and most businesses see that, but actually hiring talent is really hard. uh, and the current tooling actually requires, I think I said it before, you need this unicorn of a person who can do a lot of pipeline management, or pipeline creation, as well as mathematical problem formulation and everything together in one, and those people are few. So the opportunity is really for enterprises to not only capitalize on predictive intelligence for their business use cases, but also pick the right tooling to get it done right.
Yeah, absolutely. You're completely right. That I mean, my tenure at PayPal, we learned something in hard way, and PayPal was in that journey to going to cloud after a long time. And then while picking up the tooling, there was a lot of discussions like whether we should hire engineers to do or tooling, And obviously, the goal was not to like take away the job and give it to AI, something like that, but how to empower and make them more productive. And the path that they realize there is like, okay, we have our existing engineering talent, but we probably don't have the skill set. As you said, like somebody needs to be superhuman to work in the space. And I guess combining the human plus the product or tooling, that was the great choice that at that time PayPal did end up making, and it was a good outcome overall. And how AI could empower them and make them more productive, that was interesting to see. And I'm sure like we have also seen this pattern at other companies and also LinkedIn. That's why AI productivity was such a big theme over there.
Absolutely.
I'll pause for a second and see. I see Supragya has a question, so I will invite him to the stage. Good, Supragya, you can unmute yourself and ask question. Oh, okay. Yeah, I allowed you to speak, so can you unmute yourself and talk, Supragya? We can't hear you. You're still muted. Okay, while Supragya is back and he's able to unmute himself, I'll move forward with my next question unless I don't see any more hand raised yet. So my next question is, what are some of the common challenges you have seen in enabling predictive intelligence in these large organizations or enterprises? As you were talking about, you're talking to a few folks and you covered the use cases, and you also spoke in the beginning like who could be the right audience, as Srinivas asked you that question. So I'm curious to know what common challenges you have noticed while enabling predictive intelligence in large enterprises.
Yeah, so we alluded to this in earlier also, right? Like why is productivity a bottleneck, right? Uh, so I'll say there are two. One is productivity is a bottleneck. The second one is hiring is hard. So productivity is a bottleneck because if you look at it, there's data that lands really nicely in data warehouses, and when we see, uh, customer data in Snowflake or in Redshift or any of the modern data stack popular warehouses, we see that customers have a good understanding of how to collect their event tracking data, their put things in the right schema. By and large, that education has happened. But then if you look at the DS journey after that, they still, in a bigger enterprise, they have to comb through so many data sets to just know, okay, if I have to predict customer churn, first of all, there are like these 10 tables that are probably important, right? Which have signal. So that's one. Then after that, they have to construct a training data set. So then somehow they have to get all that data, massage it in a way that's right for machine learning. And this takes some science and a lot of engineering, right? The science part is largely just knowing what is the right sampling that needs to be done, the right you know training test splits, the right timeline based splits, and so on. But then munging all that data, which actually was sitting in an analytics warehouse to be ready for machine learning, becomes this whole other journey of processing that you need to do for for predictions. And once you get to the training table as such, a lot of companies are there are a lot of players that actually let you do like hyperparameter search, right? Or let you find the best model on one table after you've created your training data set. But there isn't a one-stop solution which says uh, or there hasn't been, and that's the problem space we're trying to solve, is there hasn't been a one-stop solution which says, here are my tables, here's my problem formulation, let me build a model. And no, that's the gap Kumo's trying to fill. The other gap that we want to fill, and then again there are other players in this space as well, is enabling predictive analytics for sales ops or for marketing teams and so on. Now those tend to be very vertical uh, focused solutions, uh, but uh, that the resourcing, like if you're in a sales team and or if you're in a marketing operations team and you need intelligence, it's very hard to get the time of a data scientist, because again that's back to the hiring problem.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that. I have seen that a lot, and everyone have a big challenge. Even like we are facing that, like hiring talent is a big problem, and right
Mm-hmm.
talent to do solve similar problems. So
Yeah.
I'll pause for a second if to see any questions from the audience.
So, to understand more, Hema,
Mm-hmm.
basically the Kumo.AI is going to interact with the data which is in data warehouses on cloud,
Yes.
and then it is going to build the predictive intelligence or analytics, and it is going to operationalize this data to the revenue applications. It may be sales, it may be any other vertical, so across the platform. Um, is it right, or else is it going to directly take the data from the transactional systems and then use the intelligence to transform the data if it is possible, and then building the predictives out of it?
The problem space would be the starting point would be the data warehouse. Uh, but it can be a data lake, right? Like it can be data landing in an S3 bucket. Like, customer data sets sit in very, very heterogeneous formats. But what I was, the problem that we want to solve is essentially that whole workflows that I talked about earlier, just completely automating that space so that, someone in sales ops, marketing ops, finance ops, they can use the tool just as much as a data scientist who wants to go deeper and, analyze models.
Yeah, I see there is a huge growth in the reverse ETL, basically the synchronization of the data. Initially, data has been used for the analytical purpose, and now started operationalizing the data by syncing up the LTV of the LTV to the front end applications, which are directly being connected to the customers. So this is going to be a huge part there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for clarification.
Thank you.
Great question, Srinivas. I see Supragya is back. Supragya, do you have question? I know you had some challenges with unmuting yourself. You can raise your hands and I can invite you to the stage. Okay, seems like don't see him raising hand, so I will move forward with my next question, unless there is any question from the audience. Okay, looks like there isn't. So my next question, Hema, for you is what are some of the solutions you have come across that seem to be working and popular?
Yeah. So I think talking about the field, and then this whole idea of productionizing ML has been there for a few years now, right? And there are players who've actually done it well in parts of the problem space. So, for example, when I was the research scientist trying to productionize models, I would have a lab set up to do modeling, and then I would, uh, you know, have to go write that same code somewhere in a production setting. I think that setup, right? Like I think some of the, like I think Jupyter notebooks and some of the tooling that actually lets you go from notebook based interfaces to, production have made life easier. Now you still have to in a notebook massage, get to your training table, so that problem is not solved. But when you're doing exploratory data analysis and then you finally say, okay, I'm going to run a tree-based model on this one table and then go from there to production. I think that, there are many players there, SageMaker, Databricks, and a whole bunch of startups. The other one was just hyperparameter search. Like we would do things very brute force, and there are some AutoML solutions out there. Again, many of the cloud providers have that as well, and I think that automation is good. The other one where I think you know some of the cloud providers have done a good job is after I have the model, being able to deploy, right? So the model deployment piece and just making that much more lightweight and much more manageable. Again, there are good solutions there. Uh, that said, I do think, and I came from a text and a content background, I do want to say that the biggest or most radical revolution has been in NLP and images. And that's been the technology or the modeling revolution, which came with deep learning, right? And so all of this workflows that I talked about, right? When I was doing text in grad school, you would write a part of speech tagger, you would write a text processor, you would then combine it all, and then, you know, uh, solve search or summarization or question answering independently. But now you can just give some transformer raw data and gets an output. And really, it's the data in warehouses that has not been touched by that deep learning revolution, which companies like Kumo are going after and hoping to transform. But I do think there's a lot happening in the NLP space and the image space in terms of machine learning tooling and automation.
Wow, that's an interesting aspect you brought it up. Like, yeah, you're right. I mean, over a period, like couple of years back when they were trying to do image processing, most of the time it wasn't right. But now I see like text to image or image to text is done so well. And yeah, I mean, the models have grown so fast. And you brought up a very interesting thing, which is I never gave a thought in depth, which is mining the data in data warehouse, and AI hasn't done or models haven't done a lot of work there, which is interesting because I think there were a couple of interesting problems that we were trying to solve again back in PayPal, where like this massive data, and the fintech team was trying to understand like what's going in their data, like if there are, it was primarily we were trying to solve data quality issues, and back then, but what are the data quality issues in that large volume of
Yeah,
data present, and how to find that chunk of data, and yeah, it's very interesting. If we can, we haven't seen many solutions out there yet. um,
true.
yeah, since we're talking about gaps, I think my next question for you would be on the similar lines. What are some of the gaps you have noticed in the space and for which there's no good solution out there yet? I mean, it's kind of like current versus the future trend we are marching towards, and yeah, if you can throw some light, would be great.
Yeah. So I think in terms of gaps, we definitely covered the gap around, like building low code ML solutions that don't require ML knowledge, right? So don't want to repeat that one. But overall, other gaps I think are in the spectrum, right? Like from um, analytics to production. So for example, you do some predictive intelligence and you're helping your uh, growth team figure out here's an uh, uh, here's a population that you want to target for your next marketing campaign. Let's take that as an example. But then going from there to the automated tooling for the enterprise, I'm saying, right? Like, okay, now how do I turn this into an actual production workflow? Um, I think that still takes some time, right? Uh, then I do think there are like an opportunity, and there are some companies that exist in the space. You brought up data quality, like just understanding that what we put in our data warehouses is good quality for AI. I think some automated solutions there would be really useful. um, I think many people can benefit from that, because even for AI, it's if it's garbage in, it's garbage out. So I think that's a good one.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I think it is tremendously helpful, and low code ML is a very exciting space where totally you can like apply ML without having without having ML knowledge and not being a PhD. I think that's a blessing, because I think getting a PhD is not easy, and as you were talking about earlier, like being that superhuman is also difficult. So if somebody has like more strengths in building pipelines, they can also empower themselves like with the low code ML solution and can still do a job end to end, which sounds great.
Yeah,
I think it's not only I think enterprises will be benefited from this, but people who are like trying to explore career or trying to grow in their career and still do some level of ML without getting a PhD, I think this will be a great thing for them. Uh,
absolutely.
so I'll pause for a second and see if there are any question from the audience.
Uh, One question. When we talk about the chart, right? Q&A with the predictive intelligence. Are you also targeting the chatbots, because one of the area which is growing very faster and becoming huge market, right? Are you going to help the chatbots to actually answer the customers with the predictive intelligence?
Yeah. So I think Kumo will shine if your data is largely relational, right? Like, you have tons of tables and you want to leverage that information. So now in the chatbot application, there are different customers would have different cases. For some of them, uh, for example, the the data is all in documents, right? And I think there are a lot of text solutions out there that would do much better, in that case. But if there's a use case where the answer to a chatbot exists in a more relational, database, uh, Kumo can potentially consider it. That's not a space we're in today, but happy to talk to anyone who has that kind of data.
Yeah. So the when you have the intelligence to predict, you already have the data. I mean, most of the companies which are who are dealing with the customers having data in the IVRS systems, IWRS systems. Basically, pull the data, build the analytics on top of it, apply predictive intelligence, and pull the best common answers and build fact out of it, rather than restricting 10 or 20 facts, right? So that can be a good one um, to integrate with, I believe.
That's a great suggestion.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Srinivas, for asking great questions. I'll see if any other question from the audience who join late, you can raise your hand and I can invite you to the stage and you can unmute and ask questions if you have any. Okay, I don't see any hand raise, so I will move forward with my next question. Hima, what will be your recommendation to enterprises who are currently building a landscape for predictive intelligence? Any tips that you would like to give them, given you are fast forward and have experience in other areas where you have seen the journey and they are beginning the journey? So if you can advise them like what could be a good path to start and what kind of strategy they can work on.
Yeah. So I would say uh, first principle is be data driven. I think that's proven enough that we don't have to question that hypothesis, right? But in being data driven, I think just laying the foundation for your data, like make the right choices in terms of the warehouses you choose, the metadata collection, the quality of tracking data. So that's like the foundation. Like if you're building a house, that's your core foundation. You can always remodel the house on top of it, but it's a little harder to go change the foundation, right? So I would say for a company that's starting the journey, get that right. After that, I think analytics, like just core analytics, right? Like uh, knowing what's happening in my product is important, right? Like just without the predictions piece. So you need to collect data, you need to start looking at your data, and your data needs to make sense. So uh, having high quality data and that you are able to look at and inform your business is the second, the next tier on top of that. And then intelligence would come as the next layer. And I think for intelligence, I think uh, you know I think it's very, again, use case specific, but having a tool that actually lets you test different hypotheses of where to invest your energy on would actually help you. So, look for tools and people who can use the tools, who can, test different hypotheses very quickly. So, I would say build your teams around that. And I think cloud first, I think that's the way to go.
Okay, that sounds great. I think what you're saying is, I mean, first narrow down your problem space and then do a bunch of experiments with tooling, and then be a data driven to come up with your strategy, and then go about solving the space. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Um, I will pause for a second and see if there are any more questions from the audience. You can either unmute Srinivas, you're on the stage, you can unmute, but if you're not on the stage, you can raise your hand and I can invite.
I am on the stage, but one final question to Hema. What is the biggest pain point that Kumo.AI is able to fulfill? I mean, solve the problem, right? So basically, um, with all your experience.
Yeah. So if you're a company that has more prediction problems to solve than you have resources to do, then Kumo actually enables you to get prediction within a few hours for those kind of problems in batch offline ways. And in the future we can consider alternate modalities. But basically, uh, for most enterprises who have more problems than uh, you know uh, engineers to be able to solve it, that's what Kumo aims to solve in a nutshell.
Yeah. So, can you throw out some stats, if whether I could ask or not? So, if fetch the data and build the model, how much time it takes, just on high level stats.
Yeah, so we're able to process, billions of records. And remember, in machine learning, we can always downsample if you have your data set is too huge. But we're able to do billion plus records within a day.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what is the recommended?
All right. I think
Yeah, I'm.
Madhu is has your back. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
hi.
you.
Sorry about that. My internet have been so like spiky. Um, so I don't know. I missed the last conversation. I hope you had an amazing discussion with Srinivas. I couldn't hear that. We are at time, Hema. I just wanted to wrap this up. So for the audience, if you have any key takeaways, if you would like to share, and we can
Yeah.
wrap it up.
I think the key takeaways would be, what I just mentioned in the last question, like be data first, look for efficiency, especially in this market and this climate. I think all organizations are, going for higher efficiency. So good tooling will give you better efficiency and faster decision making. Uh, and, you know, uh, be data first.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Hima. It was a very interesting discussion today and very insightful and walking us through your journey and sharing all these great insights about how to enable or democratize predictive intelligence for enterprises. That was very interesting. And yeah, I will publish this talk that we had right now. Those who could not attend, they can listen in later, and I'll publish this as part of my monthly newsletter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Emma, and thank you everyone who listened to this event and made it super interactive. Okay, with that, we wrap up.